The horizon darkens, not with storm clouds, but with the rising dust of 10,000 marching feet. The ground beneath the city walls shudders rhythmically, the thunderous heartbeat of a battering ram shattering the gates. Fear has a sound, and here, it is the clash of iron against bronze. This is no ordinary raid. This is the arrival of the ancient world's first superpower. Welcome to Civilization Odyssey. Today we enter the iron heart of the Assyrian Empire. To understand the soul of this empire, one must first stand upon its soil. We find ourselves in the upper reaches of the Tigris River, in the rugged heart of northern Mesopotamia. Unlike the flat, sheltered marshlands of Babylon to the south, this was a landscape of rolling plains and open horizons. Fertile, yes, but terrifyingly exposed. There were no vast deserts or impassable mountains to shield the city of Ashur. For centuries, this land was a crossroads for raiders, an anvil upon which these people were relentlessly hammered by their neighbors. But pressure creates diamonds, and in this case, it forged iron. As the great Bronze Age civilizations collapsed into smoke and ruin around 1200 BC, dragging the mighty Hittites and the Mycenaeans into the abyss, the Assyrians did not vanish. They endured. They hunkered down in their fortresses, watching the world burn, and waited for their moment. From the ashes of that global catastrophe, they began a slow, inexorable expansion. Picture the map of the Near East not as static parchment, but as a living organism, pulsing with violent energy. Through the 9th, 8th, and 7th centuries BC, while Egypt slumbered in its twilight, and the scattered tribes of Greece were barely waking from their dark slumber, Assyria was busy rewriting the definition of power. They pushed their boundaries outward, year after year, campaign after campaign, until their shadow stretched from the snowy peaks of the Zagros Mountains to the glittering waters of the Mediterranean and down into the very heart of the Nile Delta. The Mesopotamian sun is a relentless hammer here, baking the clay earth until it cracks, blurring the horizon with shimmering waves of heat. Yet, rising from this dusty haze are the great capitals: Nimrud, Khorsabad, and finally, the peerless Nineveh. To approach these cities is to feel one's own insignificance. The outer walls rise like man-made mountains, 50 feet high and thick enough for chariots to race atop them. A barrier of mud, brick, and stone that separates the chaos of the wild from the order of the king. Passing through the shadowed arches of the city gates, the noise of the bazaar erupts. A cacophony of foreign tongues, the clang of smithies, and the smell of roasting meat and unwashed bodies. But the true heart of this world lies further in. Within the citadel, here, the palaces of the Neo-Assyrian kings stand as monuments to absolute power. Standing guard at the colossal portals are the Lamassu, titanic winged bulls with the bearded heads of kings carved from single blocks of alabaster. They tower over the visitor, staring down with an eternal, stony gaze that demands submission. Inside the palace halls, the air cools, scented with the rare fragrance of cedarwood, hauled all the way from the mountains of Lebanon to roof these cavernous chambers. The walls gleam with glazed bricks in vibrant hues of lapis lazuli blue and ochre yellow. But it is the stone reliefs that command attention. Mile after mile of intricate carvings line the corridors, depicting muscles straining, lions roaring, and enemies falling. This is architecture weaponized, a visual narrative designed to overwhelm foreign ambassadors with the sheer, terrifying majesty of the Assyrian state. And amidst the stone and heat, a miracle of engineering. Stone aqueducts carry fresh water from distant mountains, feeding lush, terraced gardens that bloom like emeralds against the beige desert, proving the king controls even nature itself. It is easy to imagine this empire only as a fist of iron, but peel back the armor, and you find a society of staggering complexity and vibrant humanity. Walk the winding, narrow streets of Nineveh, and you do not hear a single voice, but a babel of tongues: Aramaic, Phoenician, Hebrew, and Egyptian. This diversity was the direct result of the empire's most radical and sorrowful policy: mass deportation. Entire populations were uprooted and moved across the map like pieces on a game board to break their rebellious spirits. Yet, in this displacement, a cosmopolitan melting pot emerged. In the cool, colonnaded courtyards of the administrative districts, the true engine of the empire hums, not with the clash of swords, but with the scratching of reeds. Here the scribes, men of high status with shaved heads and long, fringed tunics of fine linen, press their styluses into damp clay. They are the nervous system of the state, obsessively recording every bushel of barley, every tin ingot, and every celestial omen. They debate astronomy and mathematics with a sophistication that will lay the groundwork for science centuries before the Greeks. Step out into the sun-drenched fields beyond the city walls, and the reality is harsher. Here, the vast majority of the population labors under the relentless sun to feed the war machine. They are farmers and serfs, their skin weathered like old leather, guiding wooden plows through soil irrigated by the king's canals. Their diet is simple: dense bread, onions, garlic, and thick fermented beer that serves as both nutrition and comfort after a day of toil. In the domestic quarters, the social hierarchy is visually struck. Assyrian law is strict and patriarchal. It is here, in these dust-swept alleyways, that we see the first widespread use of the veil for high-born women, a marker of status in separation that will ripple through history. While the elite women remain hidden, the wives of craftsmen and laborers work with their faces to the sun, weaving intricate textiles or selling dried dates. Children play with spinning tops made of bone in the dust, their laughter a fleeting counterpoint to the gravity of the stone bulls watching from the citadel. They lived, loved, and feared, just as we do, adorning themselves with heavy gold earrings and perfuming their beards with oils, finding moments of beauty in a world built on discipline. What transformed a small city-state on the Tigris into the master of the known world? It was not merely courage, nor was it simple bloodlust. The Assyrian genius lay in the cold, calculating industrialization of warfare. Before this moment in history, wars were seasonal affairs. Farmers picked up spears after the harvest and returned home for the planting. Assyria shattered this rhythm. They created the world's first true standing army, a professional force drilled in the art of killing, fed by state granaries, and ready to march in the dead of winter. At the heart of this dominance was the metal that named the age: iron. While their enemies were still wielding the softer, scarcer bronze, the Assyrian smiths were mass-producing iron swords, spear tips, and heavy-scale armor. Iron was harder, sharper, and kept its edge through the grinding horror of prolonged combat. When an Assyrian column struck a line of bronze-clad militia, they did not just push them back, they shattered them. But their military prowess was most terrifyingly displayed not in the open field, but at the city gate. The Assyrians were the unrivaled masters of siege warfare. To hide behind high walls was no longer a guarantee of safety, it was a trap. Their engineers were mathematicians of destruction. They constructed massive, wheeled siege towers, covered in damp hides to prevent fire, which rolled inexorably toward the enemy ramparts. Inside these wooden leviathans hung the battering rams, heavy logs tipped with iron heads, swung on chains to deliver a rhythmic, earth-shaking force that pulverized stone masonry. Supporting these machines was a symphony of combined arms. While the rams pounded the gates, archers provided a curtain of suppression fire, and sappers dug beneath the foundations to collapse towers from below. They built massive earthen ramps, moving thousands of tons of dirt to create a highway over the enemy's defenses. This was engineering weaponized to a degree never before seen. They turned the taking of a city into a solvable equation, removing hope from the defenders long before the walls actually fell. To the modern mind, the brutality of Assyria appears as simple cruelty, but to the Assyrians, it was a cosmic necessity. Their world was not safe. It was a fragile island of order, surrounded by a rising tide of chaos. At the center of this psychological landscape stood the national god, Ashur. The king was not merely a ruler, he was Ashur's viceroy on earth. The mandate was terrifyingly simple: expand the borders of the god's land, or be swallowed by the darkness. To stop conquering was not peace, it was spiritual suicide. They read the will of the gods in the liver of a sheep and the movement of the stars. Living in a constant state of supernatural anxiety, this tension culminated in the royal lion hunt. This was no mere sport, it was a ritualistic drama of high state. Enclosed within an arena, the king would ride out in his chariot to face the lions, the ultimate symbols of wild, untamed nature. With the roar of the beast filling the air, the king would loose his arrows, striking the lion down. As the dust settled, he would step down, not to gloat, but to perform a solemn libation. He poured wine over the slain beast, quieting its spirit. In this act, the message was clear to all who watched. The king conquers the beast. Order conquers chaos. The sun rises for another day. The logic of empire, however, contains a fatal paradox. Terror breeds obedience, but it also breeds an unquenchable thirst for vengeance. For centuries, Assyria had sown the wind. Now they would reap the whirlwind. By the late 7th century BC, the empire was a giant with feet of clay, overextended, exhausted by endless campaigns, and gnawed at by internal dynastic strife. The wolves they had kept at bay began to gather. Sensing the heartbeat of the monster was slowing. In 612 BC, the impossible happened. A grand coalition of their bitterest enemies, the resurgent Babylonians from the south and the fierce Medes from the mountains of the east, descended upon Nineveh. This was not a battle, it was a reckoning. The great walls, once thought impenetrable, were breached, the defenses overwhelmed by the sheer fury of the oppressed. The fall was absolute. The palaces of cedar and gold were put to the torch, the flames rising so high they turned the night sky into blood. The fire was so intense it turned the very clay of the city into ceramic, vitrifying the destruction. The noise of the world's greatest metropolis was silenced, replaced by the crackle of flames and the heavy stillness of death. Within a single generation, the Assyrian state vanished from the map. The cities that had terrified the nations were left as smoking mounds of earth, abandoned to the desert winds. Yet, in a final twist of irony, the very fire that destroyed Nineveh preserved its greatest treasure. Beneath the smoldering ruins lay the library of Ashurbanipal. Thousands of clay tablets, baked hard by the flames of the siege, survived the ages to speak to us. They held medical texts, dictionaries, and the Epic of Gilgamesh, the first great work of literature. The Assyrians gave us the machinery of empire, but they also gave us the memory of mankind. This story is only one part of our human odyssey. In our next video, we journey to the Egyptians, into the land of pharaohs, pyramids, and the eternal realm. If you want to continue visualizing history and connecting humanity, subscribe and join the expedition. The legacy close. They are gone, their iron rusted, and their walls crumbled back into the mud. But whenever we read a story, or organize a state, or look to the stars to find meaning, we are walking in their long shadow. Their echo remains.